statement in February. The Chancellor has already put an extra £5 billion into the defence budget this year. We will hit 2.5% of GDP 3 years before anybody expected us to. We have ambition to hit 3% in the next Parliament, and as the Prime Minister confirmed this morning, we will spend what is needed to deliver the vision of this strategic defence review over the next 10 years and beyond.
Ellen Morgan, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I do thank the Defence Secretary for the advanced sight of his statement, but although I'm more than disappointed that I only received the SDR 2 hours ago at 3:30 after the journalists. Now, he and the Prime Minister are absolutely right. We have entered a new era, one defined by international instability, geopolitical conflict and global uncertainty. Perhaps not since the end of the Cold War have we faced such a myriad of threats to our defence. A barbaric Russian imperialism under Putin threatening Ukraine's freedom and NATO's security. A Trumpian White House defined by its total indifference and even antagonism towards the defence of Europe. And the rising threat posed by China, as well as regional pariah states like Iran and North Korea. Taken together, these threats pose a once-in-a-generation risk to our country's defence. Meeting generational risks will require making generational commitments. So I welcome the Government's readiness to accept all the recommendations outlined in today's Strategic Defence Review. It is frankly staggering, however, that we still do not have a clear answer to the vital question: where is the money coming from to fund these ambitions? It's a shopping list without the money to pay for it. Exactly, well said. The Government has flip-flopped on whether we can expect defence spending to rise to 3% of GDP, the figure on which the proposals of the SDR are premised. Putting the cart before the horse on funding the nation's defence sends entirely the wrong message to Putin and our other adversaries. So will the Minister commit today to holding cross-party talks on how to reach 3%? While I welcome the announcement of new funding for military housing and urgent repairs, fixing our recruitment crisis and doing right by our service personnel requires more than sticking plasters. Will the Government legislate to require all military homes to be brought under the Decent Home Standard? It's also desperately disappointing that despite having had 11 months to consider how to stem the decline of soldiers from the army, the Government appears to have sat on its hands. The shameful decline in troop numbers has only continued on its watch. If the Government is serious about delivering for Britain's defence, does the Minister agree with me that reversing the utterly reckless troop cuts overseen by the Conservatives must begin now?
Mr. Speaker, I welcome what she's had to say on Ukraine. She'll recognise the way that this Government has been supported by all parties in this House for the steadfast support that we've provided to Ukraine in fighting Putin's illegal invasion. She will also recognise that since July, when this Government was elected, we've stepped up still further that support for Ukraine. I hope she'll recognise the fact that we have also stepped up the leadership that the UK can offer on European security more widely. Stepping in to convene, and I chaired the first Ukraine support group after 26 meetings where the US led the way. That alongside the French, we are convening the 30-odd nations looking at planning for securing a long-term peace in Ukraine if a ceasefire can be secured. Mr. Speaker, this week at NATO, I will be continuing those discussions with defence ministers. On the SDR, this is a vision for the next 10 years and beyond. It can be delivered within the spending commitments this Government has made. As the Prime Minister underlined this morning, they were baked into the terms of reference. They've been confirmed by the reviewers. And as he has said, we will spend what we need to deliver this spending review. And I am totally confident that we will meet the ambition of 3% in the next Parliament. On military homes, Mr. Speaker, she's right that for years the scandal of making the families of those who serve live in substandard homes, often mouldy and damp, with leaking roofs and doors. We can change that. We have acted to start to do that. For the first time this year, we have now bought back and we control 36,000 family military homes. For the first time, last month, we have set out a consumer charter with the basics of what people have to expect from the MOD as their landlord. And we have confirmed as well now an extra £1.5 billion over this Parliament that we will use to deal with the worst of military family homes, and we will be able to start also being able to develop long-term, building the homes we need both for our forces and more widely in the country, and use the huge asset for this country that MOD land offers.
Dame Meg Healey, Chair of the Treasury Committee.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, may I just use this moment to pay tribute to Lord Etherton, who died recently and whose review into the misjustice to LGBTQ+ veterans was enormous. I really welcome this review from the Secretary of State. I've been around long enough to see the words review, defence and strategic or modern or whatever in many, and as the Right Honourable Gentleman highlighted, the nadir was reached on the Right Honourable Member for Stone, Great Wyley and Penkridge in a report that had more pictures than text. But this report will only live if all members of this House agree that this is long-term, because as the Right Honourable Gentleman knows, it's the chopping and changing, stopping and starting of programmes that can cause often real problems for our men and women on the ground. Will the Secretary of State, does he agree with me, and what's he doing to try and make sure that we embed this for the long term?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome my Right Honourable friend's welcome for this SDR. I welcome her recognition that this is a strategic defence review. I welcome her recognition also that this recognises the threats that we face and maps out the framework within which we have to make the investment decisions in order to deliver that, in order to make our forces stronger and, of course, British people safer. Mr. Speaker, I will work with members of all parties across this House whenever this question of national security and the safety of our people is at stake. I welcome her support, and I welcome for her chairwomanship of the Treasury Select Committee, and hope that she may take an interest in that committee, in the fact that at the heart of this SDR, at the heart of our plans, is to make the defence investment, the record defence investment that this government is now making into this country, something that just does not reinforce our national security, but that can drive economic growth, that can bring a defence dividend, that can drive the mission of this government to increase the level of economic growth and bring jobs, business and new tech to every part of the country.
Part of the House, Edward Lee.
History repeats itself. In 1935, we spent just 3% of national wealth on defence. Because we rearmed almost too late, we almost lost civilization, and by 1945, we were spending 52% of national wealth. Given that we are facing a crisis in Europe, an unparalleled Russian rearmament, almost as great as Germany in the 1930s, will the Secretary of State now do the right thing by history and commit to this House a firm commitment to 3.5%, not as an ambition, but by a set date?
Secretary of State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised the Right Honourable Gentleman, given the points he makes, has not welcomed two things. First of all, the historic increase in defence spending this government has already put in. An extra £5 billion in this, our first year in government alone. He'll remember when his party came to power in 2010, they cut defence spending by £2 billion in that year. But also the commitment and plan to increase spending to 2.5% in 2 years' time, and to 3% in the next Parliament, an ambition that I'm confident we'll hit. Can I say to him this? If we are going to meet the challenges of the SDR, if we're going to meet the challenges of reinforcing our industrial base and our armed forces as he urges, he's right also to say that we can't do this alone. We don't do this alone. We're one of 32 nations in NATO. And so the second thing I'm surprised he won't welcome is the fact we now have agreed a security and defence partnership agreement with the European Union that is the first step potentially to allowing us to work with other European nations in the European Union and use some of the financing that may be available in Europe to do exactly as he urges us to.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the whole House will be under no doubt of just how proud we are in Barrow-in-Furness to be building the submarines that keep our nation safe. The commitment to expanding this country's submarine programme with up to 12 SSN AUKUS boats to be built in our shipyard is the start of the next chapter in that illustrious career. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that defence spending under this Labour government means investment in British companies, in local supply chains and in the very fabric of our communities?
Secretary of State.
Well, indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is right. She's a strong champion for Barrow and for its shipyard. She will know that the investment programme that we have confirmed is about increasing the ability to produce more submarines more rapidly and to reach the point where we can look to design, build and launch a new submarine, a new attack submarine every 18 months. That will allow us to respond to the threats that we anticipate in 10, 20 years' time. It will allow us to meet our NATO commitments, and we will succeed in doing this to the extent that we have a government ready to invest, and we have a town in Barrow and a supply chain across the whole of the United Kingdom of proud workers willing to lend their professional expertise to this production and this most important mission, securing our nation's defences for the future, contributing to a stronger NATO and also reinforcing our ability to generate jobs and prosperity, including in Barrow.
Lincoln Job.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for his statement. When I worked on these in the Ministry of Defence, all defence reviews had up arrows and down arrows. And from what I've read in the brief time that we've had the defence review, it does seem a lot of up arrows. There's only one that I can really find, which is not extending dreadnoughts out of service date beyond 2050. Does the Secretary of State want to roll the pitch a bit and just indicate where capabilities might be de-emphasised or indeed lost?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a strategic defence review that sets out a vision and a framework for decisions over the next 10 years and beyond. It could only be delivered because of the increase in defence spending, the historic increase, the largest increase in defence spending this government has made since the end of the Cold War. That is the basis on which we'll make the decisions. That's the basis on which we will deliver the SDR's recommendations.
Alex Baker.
Deputy Speaker. It's a proud day for us in the home of the British Army to see Labour investing more in defence. More than we saw under 14 years of the Tory government. It's clear to me that we need more innovative financing solutions to support the new defence technologies set out in the SDR, such as the technologies being developed at Cody Business Park in Farnborough, which I visited this morning. Will the Secretary of State support my campaign for a multilateral defence, security and resilience bank to help power more investment, jobs and opportunities in Aldershot, Farnborough and right across the country?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, she is proud of the government, she's proud of the SDR, and I have to say we are proud of her as the first Labour MP ever for the town of Aldershot, the home of the British Army, and she serves that community and she serves the Army with great distinction as the town's MP. She is also doing some extremely valuable work on how we start to make sure that we can match the significant increase in public investment, taxpayers' investment in our defence, with more private sources of investment. And I'm following the work that she's doing in developing those ideas very closely, and I'm looking at them very closely as well, as I know my right honourable friend the Chancellor is too.
Sir James Cleverly.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like many in the House, I've only had a chance to skim read the SDR. Fundamentally, it seems to be heading in the right direction. But why so timid? Why so slow? If as the Right Honourable Gentleman says, we are facing an era-defining moment, then why not move with the pace that that era demands? Why not commit to 3% in a meaningful timescale to give industry and the forces some serious opportunity to plan and make this a document that is worth its name, rather than just a let's see how little we can get away with to keep the papers happy?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I reject that characterisation completely. I'm glad he recognises this is the SDR going in the right direction. It certainly is. He will therefore recognise it is a complete break from what the government that he was a leading member of less than a year ago was presiding over. 14 years of hollowing out and underfunding our armed forces, and ended now. A defence with no vision for the future, that's ended now. A plan to make sure that we can bring the very best of innovative technology to reinforce the strength of our armed forces and the traditional hardware we've got, that ends now. The SDR will deliver that vision. We will deliver it.
Kelvin Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This SDR underpins the reason why I left the Royal Air Force: to be part of a government that takes its commitment to defence and security seriously, and which brings about the end of hollowing out of our armed forces that took place under the last government. The measures taken within this SDR reverse fundamental and damaging delays that the previous government took within our defence programmes, supports our personnel and provides a clear and credible path to meeting the challenges presented to us by Russia. But in the words of General Barrons, the greatest threat to this SDR is in its delivery. So, can my right honourable friend provide us with an understanding of what measures are being put in place to ensure that we deliver the SDR and the defence proposition that underwrites our defence and our security and prosperity?
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend and the contribution he makes to debates in this House and to the determination of the Labour government to deliver this SDR. I said in my opening remarks, there cannot be investment without reform, and from day one, reform was a top priority for me as Defence Secretary. It does not bring photo opportunities and front pages, but potentially it brings the results that we need in the future. So we have set up a military strategic headquarters. We have the Chief of the Defence Staff for the first time now commanding the chiefs. We have a new National Armaments Director. We have a single investment budget. We have budgetary control now that was not there before. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are the ways, the reforms in place, the further reforms we will drive that the SDR reinforces and endorses. This is the way that we give ourselves the best chance to deliver the vision set out by the reviewers so ably in the Strategic Defence Review report.
Madam Deputy Speaker, what is the difference between the Chancellor's black hole and the Defence Secretary accepting 62 recommendations from the SDR without committing the funds to pay for them?
Because the Prime Minister and the government have committed the funds. We've committed the funds. We've built them into the terms of reference that allow this strategic defence review over the next 10 years and beyond to be delivered. That's the confirmed view of the reviewers. That's exactly what my job now as Defence Secretary will be to do.
Fred Thomas.
Speaker, and I strongly welcome the Secretary of State's support and his leadership in this time of increased threats. We saw over the weekend that Ukraine have managed to destroy, they say, as many as 40 Russian bombers deep inside Russia. That's at a value, they would say, of £5 billion, which is almost as much as we are raising the defence budget by. So we have to get after innovation, and this SDR does that. In particular, I wanted to ask the Secretary of State about page 59, talking about rapid commercial exploitation quickly. It mentions pulling the latest technology into operations, unlocking private equity and venture capital. My question is this: do we need to change the commercial competition laws within the civil service to allow that to happen, or can it already happen?
We certainly have to change the procurement system. And the Chancellor and I have already announced at the spring statement the way that we will ensure that the sort of innovation that my honourable friend talks about can move from to contract far faster than we've done before, and that we can make sure that the sort of spiral development that the Shadow Defence Secretary first started to look at in government can actually be pursued and put in place. We will do that. It's part of the procurement reforms that we are bringing in place, because pace, as well as new innovation and new companies that have so much to offer, are part of how we do this in the future.
Sarah Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I just say that Mark Rutte, head of NATO, the last few days said that all NATO nations must achieve 3.5% of GDP on defence spending. Now, I heard the right honourable gentleman, a man, by the way, I respect a lot, and he's known me for a long time in this House. I simply say to him, when he said on Saturday there is no doubt the UK defence spending will rise by 3% by 2034, I nodded in approval and thought, great, they've got a commitment. By Sunday, that appears not to be the case. Can I say to him, nobody here wants this strategic defence review to succeed more than I do, having sat in here and never agreed with the idea of the peace dividend from start to finish. Russia, China, North Korea and Iran are all seen as threats inside this. So will he now, please, get to the dispatch box, as the character that he is, and say, to achieve this, we will need at least 3%, if not more, and this government will be committed to spending it.
Secretary of State.
I'd say to the right honourable gentleman, look, don't take it from me at the dispatch box this afternoon, take it from the Prime Minister when he said, we will spend what is needed to deliver this review. He's made that commitment in the House. He's made that commitment today. It is the vision of this strategic defence review that becomes now the mission of this government to deliver.
Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Much of the new hardware pledged today won't be delivered for some years and won't be effective without the personnel to operate it. So I ask the Secretary of State, what more will the government do today, right now, not in 2034, to ensure our armed forces are recruiting those service personnel that these long-term plans will rely on?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman is right. In many ways, defence is a special case. Many of the decisions we need to take now in order to secure the future of future generations, in order to develop and secure the capabilities we will need in order to do that in 10, 20 and 30 years' time. And he's also right that it's the people that are at the heart of this. In terms of recruiting into the armed forces, he'll recognise the 14 years of failure and the recruitment and retention crisis that we were left with last summer. He will know that I've removed over 100 of the rules that prevented some people from applying to join the forces. He will know that I've introduced a direct entry for those with cyber talent to join and contribute to our defences. And he will recognise also that we are looking to retain those who are valuable to us, paying better, looking to upgrade the housing, and where needed, special retention payments to deal with it. This is going to take time. We're closing the gap, but I'm determined that we will reverse that long-term decline. And for the first time, this is a government that wants to increase, not see a further cut in the size of our army.
Emma Lewell.
This review is welcome. Where the last government hollowed out our armed forces, we are rebuilding. Russia's Northern Fleet and China's Polar Silk Road ambitions have seen both countries focus and cooperate in the High North. As the framework nation for the JEF, the UK has limited surface fleet capable of operating in the polar ice. Can my right honourable friend confirm if the new hybrid navy will see this capability scaled up?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can, and I can also say to my honourable friend, she plays an important part in debates in this House, including on the Defence Select Committee. She recognises that as we can see from Ukraine, and as we can see from Ukraine, it is the nations that are able to bring together the innovation, the rapid innovation in new technology, with the hardware of established weaponry and platforms that will have the combat edge in the future. I'm determined that Britain will be at the leading edge of innovation in NATO, that our forces will be better equipped in the future, and that we will reform and rebuild our British industry to be able to equip them for exactly that.
John Clare.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome the aspirations of this strategic defence review. And I welcome the statement on page 7 where it says we will develop a new defence investment plan. But as the Secretary of State knows, through all the budgets and fiscal events that he sat through, he cannot give this House a categorical assurance over future spending commitments. So I would ask him that he makes clear to this House what decisions he is prepared to make with respect to the existing commitments such that he can secure that additional funding at subsequent spending reviews and budgets. And I do hope that when he does come clean completely to this House, he will make clear that there will be considerable ongoing investment at DSTL at Porton Down, because they do an enormous amount to secure the future understanding of future technologies in the defence arena.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the delivery of the SDR vision can only be done because of the commitment to increase defence spending this government has made. The defence investment plan is a new investment framework, a new investment programme, developed in the context and defined by this SDR vision. The work on that new investment plan will be completed and published in the autumn.
Chianwara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And there's much in this strategic defence review which will be of interest to my committee, but I welcome the report, and in particular the recognition that science, innovation and technology are both an opportunity as well as a threat. Can he confirm that the numerous references to AI in the report are to a sovereign AI capability, whether publicly or privately developed? And Madam Deputy Speaker, having spent last week in Brunei as part of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, observing the amazing work of the Royal Gurkha Rifles, will he also confirm that despite this tilt back to NATO, he recognises the contribution and strategic importance of this base in the South China Seas?
Secretary of State.
Madam Speaker, my honourable friend is right. The NATO first approach at the heart of this strategic defence review and the heart of this government's commitment to our collective deterrence and defence in the Euro-Atlantic is NATO first, but it's not NATO only. And so alliances and partnerships such as GCAP or AUKUS and partnerships that we have with other nations remain important. On the question of innovation and the British base, she will recognise that as part of warfighting readiness, we require an industrial readiness. And that industrial readiness, that industrial deterrence that is part of preventing our adversaries from considering attacks against us, means that our companies must be able to innovate, they must be able to scale up production if we're faced with conflicts in the future. And that will be, if you like, a touchstone for the way that we will take many of the decisions as we invest in the future.
And Mike Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This defence review gives us a long shopping list of technological advances: the Cyber Command, digital backbone, drones, AI, and this is right and proper. But the British military is tiny. Recently, the Select Committee heard that if we had to fight tonight, we could scratch together 5 ships and 30 planes. And the person who told us this was the former head of the MOD's own Strategic Net Assessment Office. So would the Secretary of State agree that the lesson from Ukraine is actually that to fight and win wars, you need to have a mass of force, a large force with tech that is good enough, rather than a small, perfectly formed, high-tech force? And is this lesson being heeded in the review? Short answer, yes. Longer answer, we do not fight alone.
We do not plan to fight alone. We are a leading member of NATO, the 32-strong alliance that's never been bigger, never been stronger. And as we approach the NATO summit later this month, there will be a discussion about the capabilities that each of the nations contributes and develops in the years ahead so that we can strengthen that collective deterrence, we can avoid the wars that we don't want to fight, and we can also strengthen our collective and our UK defence.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Anyone who heard Carsten Breuer, Germany's Chief of Defence, speak at the weekend will have found his words deeply sobering. So can I congratulate my right honourable friend on the SDR, modernising our defence from Atlantic bastion to the transformation of our defence and a tech-driven approach. I particularly welcome the cyber and electromagnetic command, but he spoke of a stronger deterrence. Could he confirm there is a need now for stronger offensive cyber work by our forces?
Kate.
Indeed, my honourable friend is right. He'll be aware of the National Cyber Force that we are developing further. He will be aware that I have confirmed and the SDR recommends the establishment of a cyber and electromagnetic command that will be in place and that will do exactly as he suggests. It will reinforce our capacity, it will reinforce our expertise, it will reinforce our ability both to do defensive and offensive cyber as part of the deterrence and the defence that we need of this country.
Alex Shalbrook.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Defence Review. It does set a direction, there's much in it, but I would like to just say some of the Secretary of State, which I don't agree with, on page 68, paragraph 20, about Defence should only run training and education itself when it cannot be obtained externally at suitable cost, because I think tying in with page 105 and point 4, where it says it reconsiders its training estate need, the Navy should ensure this capacity by design. I worry that that would mean the closing of Dartmouth. And the reason I link those two statements together, I'm sure the Secretary of State has visited Annapolis in the United States, Royal Naval Officer Training. And the model they have there really is one that brings a real fellowship to people who want to stay in the armed forces because of all those things that are offered through those degrees, etc. So can I urge the Secretary of State to perhaps, when we have a further debate, I'll expand on those comments, but also give a reassurance that great institutions and buildings such as Dartmouth are not going to be closed under this review.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this SDR and the plans that will follow will only build further on the proud professional tradition and reputation of our Navy, our RAF and our Army training. And I say to the Honourable Gentleman, I look forward to the further debates that he promises.
Ben.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the calm assurance that my right honourable friend has brought to the House today? Our country is safer and stronger for the decisions that he has announced today. But if we are to be more prosperous too, then we will need clear objectives for the spending that he has announced to drive more jobs, more innovation and more economic growth here in our country. Will he set out clear targets for each of those objectives when he brings forward the Defence Industrial Strategy a little bit later on this year?
The Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I will take my right honourable friend's well-informed observations into account. I will take the observations of his Select Committee into account. I welcome the attention that he has given to this as we develop our thinking for the Defence Industrial Strategy.
Kirsty Blackman.
There's a serious lack of answers here. Apparently there's going to be further clarity in the forthcoming Defence Industrial Strategy, Financial Services Strategy, Defence Diplomacy Strategy, Reserve Personnel Strategy, Defence Housing Strategy and Defence Estate Optimisation Programme. And he can't even provide clarity on where the money's coming from. Can the Secretary of State provide some answers on what on earth they've spent the last year reviewing?
State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we've spent the last 10 months delivering for defence. We put in place the largest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We've given the armed forces the biggest pay rise for more than 20 years. We've devoted 1.5 billion now to increasing the standard of armed forces housing, and we bought back 36,000 military homes. We've invested in stronger veteran support. Madam Deputy Speaker, we've also struck the most deep defence agreement, the Trinity House Agreement with Germany. Madam Deputy Speaker, we're delivering for defence. This is a government that will do more, and the SDR gives us the vision and direction to do that.
Debbie Abraham.
And I welcome the SDR and also in particular the reference to the increase in investment in the Defence Medical Services. But given that 70% of veterans have a clinical mental health condition, can my right honourable friend explain the interface that this will have with the NHS mental health services and how that will be managed?
Secretary of State.
Yeah, my honourable friend makes a really important point. Just as the NHS contributes to our armed forces, members of our armed forces are often working full-time within our NHS. It's a synergy that few understand and few appreciate. It's a strength that we need to build on, and I will be working with my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, jointly in the coming months to advance the recommendations and the vision for reinforcing the readiness and the strength of our armed medical services.
Stuart Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do welcome the NATO First strategy in the SDR and that we are looking to lead within NATO. So last week I was in Dayton, Ohio on the NATO Parliamentary Assembly where the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, said 3% will not be a credible solution to defence. He's going to set this out in the NATO summit, and that 3.5% was required to be credible, with 1.5% on defence-related funding that is going to be set out this month. Will the Defence Secretary, if this is what NATO say is a credible commitment, commit to 3.5%?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, those are discussions for the NATO summit later this month. We go into that NATO summit having made a record commitment to invest and increase defence spending to a level in 2 years' time that we've not seen in this country since 2010, and an aim in the next Parliament to get to 3%. That NATO summit will be a discussion just about as much as how we spend and how well we spend and the capabilities that we can contribute to NATO, as it will be about the spending commitments that are made. And I just say to the honourable gentleman and to this House, we make an extraordinary contribution as a nation to NATO. We will step that up through pursuing the SDR vision, and of course at the heart of it is something we contribute that no other nation does. In full, we commit our UK nuclear deterrent to NATO, not just as the ultimate guarantor of our own national security, but to the security of our NATO allies.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Under the last government, only 2 out of 49 major defence projects were being delivered on time and on budget. Does the Minister agree with me that this government is getting to grips with the financial mismanagement and failed procurement system we inherited? And given that the extra defence spending has come from the aid budget, does my right honourable friend agree it's even more important that additional money delivers frontline capabilities and jobs and isn't lost into the system or to the bottom line?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's always important that public money is well spent and that we can demonstrate good value for money and value. We have some way to go still on reform of defence, but the steps that we've taken already, the action that we plan in the future, will help us ensure that we can get better value for the British taxpayer and we can get better value for the British forces.
Alistair Carmichael.
The review describes responsibility for space policy in government as being fragmented. So their proposal for a reinvigorated Cabinet subcommittee to set the strategic approach to space, I think, is one to be welcomed. And this is something which will clearly have significant implications for the development of a vertical launch satellite facility at Saxiford Spaceport in Shetland. But will the Secretary of State ensure that hardwired into that subcommittee there is a process of engagement for the operators at Saxiford and the communities that host them, so that both might be empowered to deliver on this most important strategic objective for the country as a whole?
At the heart of the SDR's insight and recommendations is a new relationship between government and industry, one that we've already started to put in place, one that allows industry and potentially investors to see that the challenges that we face and contribute their ideas and their innovation to solving those. That will be applied just as much in space as it will in other areas of new capabilities that we need to develop.
Speaker, the procurement system that my right honourable friend inherited from the party opposite is in chaos. Only 2 major defence projects delivered out of 49 on time. So I wonder if my right honourable friend can say what he's doing to get to grips with that situation, because new technology needs to be delivered on time, otherwise it risks being outdated by the time it's put into use.
My honourable friend is right, and he's sitting next to my right honourable friend there, who chaired the Public Accounts Committee that branded and quite rightly saw the defence procurement system as broken. It's a measure of the extent of the reform, the overhaul that is required. We've begun that and we will complete that.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Recommendation 26 sensibly calls for the expansion of in-school cadet forces. So will the Defence Secretary now work with the Department for Education to reverse their penny-pinching cuts and reinstate the school staff instructor grants to help extend cadet forces into more state schools?
We will indeed work with the Department for Education in delivering this recommendation and this ambition. Quite rightly, the SDR review have set out, which is to increase the number of cadets by 30% by 2030. It offers a unique opportunity for many young people, skills, experience that makes a transformation to their lives and their prospects.
Herring Moon.
Whereas, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is unquestionably an important moment, a significant review, so I find it incredible, astonishing in fact, that once again, for this important statement, Reform members have gone AWOL. They clearly don't give a damn about the defence of our country. On page 35 of the review, there is an overview of the dependencies and threats and includes critical minerals such as lithium. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the most effective way to reduce dependency on such critical minerals from the likes of China is to invest heavily and urgently in domestically produced and processed critical minerals like tin, lithium and tungsten in Cornwall?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not sure whether the honourable gentleman has tin, lithium and tungsten mines in his own constituency, but he's quite right to point to those natural reserves in this country, in Cornwall, and he makes a very powerful case to this House this afternoon.
Gavin Robinson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State will know that my party and the people we are privileged to represent from Northern Ireland are hugely supportive of our armed forces, and he should know that as a region we disproportionately provide more personnel than any other part of our country to those armed forces. I was encouraged to hear him talk about every region and nation of the United Kingdom benefiting from this SDR, but whilst we heard about Derby and Govan and Barrow, there was a slight omission about Northern Ireland. Now, the Secretary of State knows how pivotal companies in my constituency were for Ukraine in their initial phase of defence with Enlaw and more laterally Starstreet. Can he confirm that Northern Ireland will indeed benefit from strategic and significant investment?
Secretary of State.
I can indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the right honourable gentleman knows it is already as a result of decisions this government has taken, not least the LMM missiles that are produced in his constituency, which we are ramping up to deliver more to Ukraine during this year. And I say to him, the £6 billion that I've announced in munitions for this next 5 years, which will include another 6 munitions and explosives factories. I hope he will welcome that, because he will know, just as in Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England, the munitions production is already the source of skilled jobs, long-term jobs, well-paid jobs, trade unionised jobs, and something I know he will welcome for the future as well.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The importance of good cyber security is referenced throughout the SDR. It is critical for our defence. Now, in Ebervale College, there's an excellent course in this sector. So to address this threat, can the Secretary of State please advise how the government plan to get more young people into roles in cyber security for the future?
State.
Well, I'd encourage my honourable friend to take a hard look at the plans. The first recruitment is underway at the moment for this new direct entry of young people who've got gaming skills, coding skills, computer skills, the sort of skills that are invaluable for our armed forces in that wider mission of defending the country, and the direct entry route that our new cyber force recruitment is making available. And I know that there will be talented young people in his constituency that have a part to play, and I think an interest in helping the nation.
Questions are very long and the answers are getting longer as well. We need to get many colleagues in, so can we please keep it short? Sir Julian Lewis.
It's tempting to remind the Secretary of State of the 4.5% to 5% of GDP spent on defence by Conservative governments throughout the Cold War years of the 1980s. But instead, may I ask him whether he would, like me, endorse what Admiral Lord West wrote in the national press last week when he stated that the Chagos deal was a disgraceful decision, and as a former Chief of Defence Intelligence, he did not accept that the move is, quote, absolutely vital for our defence and intelligence, as the Prime Minister claims. He is a former Labour Security Minister and their current House of Lords representative on the Intelligence and Security Committee, so he knows what he's talking about, doesn't he?
Secretary of State.
On the contrary, Madam Deputy Speaker, this deal is essential to safeguard the operational sovereignty for the UK of the base on Diego Garcia, to allow us to protect within the 20 nautical mile radius of that base the ability to safeguard that for the future. It's essential to our and American intelligence and defence operations. It is a linchpin of that special relationship that we have between the US and the UK on intelligence and defence matters that the Right Honourable Gentleman is always such a strong champion of.
Zara Sultana.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. While the government pledges to raise defence spending to 3% of GDP, funneling hundreds of billions in public money to arms companies and their shareholders, and continuing to arm Israel's genocide in Gaza, it is at the same time slashing disability benefits, keeping millions of children in poverty through the two-child benefit cap, and cutting winter fuel support for pensioners. How does the government justify finding billions for war while claiming there's nothing for the poor?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the first duty of any government is to defend the country and keep it safe and sound. We invest in defence in order to deter and prevent the war that brings such extreme human and economic costs. And I just ask my honourable friend to consider this. If we can't defend the country, where will we be with an NHS without power? With submarine cables that mean data doesn't work. Strong national security is fundamental to a stable economy, a strong society, and I hope my right honourable friend will recognise this is imperative and important for the country, that we pursue the vision in the SDR.
Wendy Chambers.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it was right that the Secretary of State recognised the military communities that serve across the UK, and it's also right that we recognise the communities that support them. The Strategic Defence Review recommendations that the Government has accepted will have a direct impact on communities across the UK. So can I ask the Secretary of State, when will we know, so that communities such as Lookers in my own constituency of North East Fife are aware of the implications of the Defence Review, and so that we are thinking of things such as education, transport, health and other infrastructure too?
State.
Well, from today, Madam Deputy Speaker, the armed forces communities, including in hers, in her constituency, will be able to read the report for themselves. They will be able to draw the implications for them and their families for themselves.
Julie Binns.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm proud that my constituency of Carlisle and North Cumbria is home to Europe's only electronic tactics facility, and I'm proud that it's this government that has set out steps in this SDR to strengthen our electromagnetic and cyber defences. Could the Secretary of State say a little bit more about why those elements of our defence are so critical?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the facility of my honourable friend's constituency plays a really essential role in our national security. I welcome her support for this, and she'll recognise that the decision to set up a cyber and electromagnetic command is part of what the SDR does, drawing lessons from what we can see about the way that the nature of warfare is changing week by week in Ukraine.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The document says this will allow us to grow our nuclear-powered attack submarine fleet to up to 12. And isn't the truth, and let's speak the truth, that this is the ask to the Treasury? The spending review has yet to decide what the defence programme will actually be. I hear what he says when he says, with his full force and sincerity, that, quotes, we will fund this spending review, this defence review. But how is he going to achieve that without very much more significant cuts in other budgets, because this government and no government can afford to spend much more and borrow much more, if anything at all. So how is he going to get the cuts through necessary to fund this big increase in defence spending beyond 3.5%, because we all know we're going to need more than that?
He asked me about the attack subs. This is an investment that we're making now in the production capacity so that we can build at a faster rate. We can have a double production line in Barrow. That will allow us to build new subs to meet the number of subs we'll need in the future to deter the threats that we will face, meet our NATO commitments, and I'm glad that he welcomes it.
Joanna Baxter.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to congratulate my right honourable friend for his statement, because this is a significant investment in the security of our nation. I was thrilled to see the Prime Minister announce up to 12 new attack submarines, boosting growth in Scotland and the UK, keeping the UK safe for years to come. But I was astonished to read over the weekend that the SNP government in Holyrood is blocking investment in a specialist welding centre in Glasgow by withdrawing a £2.5 million grant. So can the Secretary of State confirm to the House, if the SNP continues to block the funding for this centre, will this Labour government step in?
Secretary of State.
I was astonished to learn over the weekend that the SNP government is withholding a £2.5 million support for Rolls-Royce to set up a specialist welding skills centre. This is essential, not for munitions, as the SNP government says, but for the across the board, the sort of pipeline in the shipyards that bring such wealth and jobs to Scotland. And I can confirm to my honourable friend, if the SNP will not change their view, if they will not step in to make this skills centre possible, then we will.
Dame Caroline Dinage.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Constituents in Gosport will be keen for him to clarify 2 points, please. This line, page 105, reconsidering training estate needs, will concern many. Could he confirm that the outstanding training establishments at HMS Sultan and HMS Collingwood, which employ so many, will not be under threat? And secondly, when will the promised funds for accommodation come through? Because the previous government spent £400 million on upgrading that. It was beginning to filter through, but now there are 69 units of service family accommodation in Gosport which are empty because they are deemed not fit for human habitation, and it's getting worse under his watch.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we are doing further work on the nature and the needs for our defence estate. It's right that we do that. Because we have a long-term view now, we'll be able to take better long-term decisions on that. In terms of the 67 homes that she mentions, these are part of 8,000 family military homes which are empty at the moment, many because they're unfit for families to live in. I hope she'll welcome the 1.5 billion extra in this Parliament that we will create to overhauling the worst. I hope she'll also welcome the longer-term plan in the defence housing strategy that we will publish, because we can do much better, and we must do much better for our military families.
Louise Jones. As a veteran and on behalf of my constituents in North East Derbyshire who are serving or have loved ones in the armed forces, can I just say how much I welcome the commitment to supporting armed forces personnel in this review. The recognition that we need to improve the defence medical services, the 1.5 billion for housing, and also the commitment for a second above inflation pay rise for our personnel, which means that for the first time in a long time, no member of our armed forces will receive less than the national living wage. And it was a shock that that was ever the case. It's shocking that that was ever the case. Will the Secretary of State agree with me that this shows, and while the Conservatives are the ones who left us in this mess, that Reform couldn't even bother to turn up, that this shows only Labour is the party for our armed forces personnel?
My honourable friend is right. Labour is the party of defence. Labour is the party that will put defence people right at the heart of our plans for the future. Better pay, better housing, better kit to do the jobs that they serve and they volunteer to do to defend us all.
Ellie Chowns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This government seems to have confused security with spending more on weapons, but warheads don't buy a safer world. They make it more dangerous. So can I ask the Minister, instead of wasting 15 billion on nuclear warheads, weapons that must never be used and that should be as unacceptable as biological and chemical weapons, instead of wasting 15 billion on nuclear warheads at a taxpayer subsidy of more than £1 million per job created, why not spend that money instead on real security, which must involve defence and diplomacy and development? Real security, like decent housing and public services. Real security, like tackling the challenges of the climate crisis and pandemic preparedness.
Secretary of State, Secretary, order, Secretary of State.
We strengthen our armed forces to secure the peace, not to fight the war. We deter the attacks that we fear by being strong enough to defeat our enemies. And I say to the Honourable Lady, on our deterrent, this has helped keep the stability and peace in Europe for over 75 years. It has been the ultimate guarantee of our national security. It is what Putin fears most. And in NATO, we are the only nation, the only European nation that commits its deterrent in full to the protection of other NATO allies. We play a unique role, we make a unique contribution. I really would like the Honourable Lady to recognise that, even if she can't support it.
Patricia Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was pleased to read in the SDR about the importance of building on the 2024 Joint Declaration on the Norwegian-UK Strategic Partnership, a partnership that recognises the autonomy of both countries, but the strength that comes from working together. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that this important partnership would be further strengthened if Norway decided to purchase the Type 26 frigates, the best frigates in the world, built in Govan and Glasgow South West and Scotstoun in my Glasgow West constituency?
Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, the best frigates in the world, and I have been working hard to persuade the Norwegians that joining the UK with our Type 26 frigates is about reinforcing the deep partnership that we already have in two nations alongside the US, protecting the North Atlantic and the High North from Russian aggression.
This statement's been going on for well over an hour. We'll have to conclude in the next 20 minutes. The questions will have to be short, as will the answers. So Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State has set out an ambitious defence review this afternoon. Will he, as soon as possible after the spending review next week, set out in a defence investment plan in some detail so that the PAC can examine whether the funds match the equipment that he's talked about today, so that this ambitious plan can be delivered and is affordable?
Secretary of State.
Well, as Chair of the PAC, he knows the problem with the previous government's defence equipment plan. I said in my statement the work will be completed and published on a new defence investment plan in the autumn.
Graham Downey.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for his statement today. The review puts shipbuilding firmly at the future defence of the UK, particularly in the High North, something I've raised in this House many times, and looking towards a Royal Navy which is powerful, cheaper and simpler. The workforce at the dockyards in Rosyth and my constituency are ideally placed to deliver this, and just last week we saw the rollout of HMS Venturer, the first Type 31 frigate for the Royal Navy. Can I ask the Secretary of State to confirm that he is committed to shipbuilding in Scotland, including in my constituency, in contrast to the SNP who just this week turned down the opportunity to bring new skills to that sector in Scotland?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we are totally committed to shipbuilding in Scotland, and I pay tribute to the workers in his constituency in Rosyth for their pride, their professionalism and the sense of purpose and the contribution they make to our national security.
Callum Miller.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the service personnel and their families of Bicester Garrison in my constituency are victims of the scandal of military family housing to which the Secretary of State referred. The investments highlighted today are therefore welcome, but to reassure my constituents, can the Secretary of State commit that military housing will reach the decent home standard? Can he give the date by which the Defence Housing Strategy will be published? And can he confirm that he's accepted the recommendation in the SDR that all proceeds from housing developments on MOD land will be reinvested in military housing?
Secretary of State.
The honourable gentleman is right to raise this long-run scandal. I'm sure will recognise that we can't turn this round overnight. I hope he'll also recognise the steps we've already taken this year, the 36,000 military homes brought back into public control, the plans we're putting in place for the future. It will allow us to put an end, finally, in this Parliament to the scandal that we've seen of military families forced to live in such substandard accommodation.
Olivia Bailey.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I warmly welcome the Secretary of State's confirmation that this government will invest £15 billion in the nuclear warhead programme at the atomic weapons establishment in my constituency. Not only is this crucial for national security, it will be transformational for Reading West and Mid-Berkshire, supporting jobs and boosting our local economy. Will the Secretary of State set out in greater detail the plans for this investment and the expected benefits to my constituents? And will he come with me to Aldermaston, Burfield or Brimpton to meet with some of the brilliant staff who work there?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I will, and I'll look forward to that visit with my honourable friend, and she will know, as the constituency MP, both the essential and unique work that AWE undertakes, but she'll also know that it supports over 9,500 jobs, and she will recognise that defence dividend that can bring not just to her area but the wider supply chain from this increase in defence investment that this government is now making.
Harriet Cross.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And while it's welcome that the SDR refers to the need for more routine protection of subsea cables and pipelines and maritime traffic, there's no specific mention for the same commitment to the protection of North Sea oil and gas platforms, rigs and SPSOs, which are just as important to our energy security, which is our national security, and can have much more catastrophic consequences if they were attacked. Will the Secretary of State confirm that these structures will be included in any plan for the routine securing and protecting of critical national infrastructure?
Secretary of State.
Yes.
Catherine Atkinson.
Our British fleet of submarines are the most awesome and lethal machines in the world, keeping the peace unseen and unheard below the waves for generations. And as my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, has said, the power in that punch comes from Derby's Rolls-Royce workers, which give them their nuclear reactor cores. Will the Defence Secretary tell members how we can be involved in the recommended National Endeavour public communications campaign to make absolutely clear how fundamental our at-sea deterrent is to our national security?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in many ways my honourable friend is doing exactly that this afternoon in the House by reinforcing the importance of this at the heart of our security, but also the importance of it to the jobs, the technology, the businesses, the supply chain, and the strength of the economic growth. And she is making the case that defence investment can drive economic growth, and we will make sure that it does.
Paul Holmes. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I refer the House to my interest declared in the Register. Can I just push the Secretary of State on the answer he gave to my right honourable friend, the member for Gosport, about HMS Collingwood? My constituents will look for reassurance at making sure that has a long-term place in the defence estate. But can I also ask him about recommendation 40, which says the Royal Navy should explore alternative approaches to augmenting the Royal Fleet Auxiliary to deliver a balanced, cost-effective fleet that maximises the UK's warfighting capabilities. The RFA is already stretched, and I've been on visits to the RFA where they have told me that they are stretched with the operational requirements placed on them. Can I ask him, it sounds to me like that is a loss of operational independence, so will he commit to an expansion of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary consisting of ships that are purely managed by the Royal Navy under the Defence Estate?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we're proud of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. They increasingly do tough jobs that in the past we would have expected the Royal Navy to undertake. Their role and contribution is under-recognised, and I'm keen to see their role reinforced, the recognition greater, and we will make sure that we do that as we pursue the SDR's vision.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The 1st Division, headquartered in my constituency, impressed upon me the importance of our diplomacy and soft power and the excellence of the training which is provided to our armed forces. We've heard a lot about hard power today, but will he ensure that we put serious resources into that soft power, the diplomacy, which is so important at de-escalating risk, and also will he ensure that we continue that training in my armed forces city of York?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, her city, the City of York, has a proud military history. She speaks strongly of it this afternoon. She's right to recognise the role of diplomacy alongside hard defence, but perhaps she also could do more to recognise the fact that defence, military and civilian defence personnel have an important diplomatic role to play alongside the Foreign Office, and one of the things we're doing is working much more closely together in this government compared to the way that we've seen foreign and defence secretaries too often in the past at loggerheads rather than working cooperatively.
Dr Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, Sleaford and North Highcombe is the home to RAF Cranwell, RAF Digby, much of RAF Waddington and Beckingham Training Ranges. This defence review will be read with interest across the constituency. Many of my constituents serve in the armed forces, are veterans or work in the defence industry. Could the right honourable gentleman please confirm, firstly, will he give a commitment to the expansion of RAF Digby, which is currently planned, and secondly, will he ensure that he supports the Greater Lincolnshire Regional Defence Security Cluster, which was established in 2023?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can't give her a commitment at the dispatch box today, but I can say to her that I take those arguments seriously. I hear what she has to say this afternoon, and she's speaking up for her area, and there has some great strengths in her part of Lincolnshire.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. These 12 new nuclear-powered AUKUS submarines will almost double the UK's fleet of such submarines. Given these submarines are to be shared with non-nuclear Australia, doesn't this go against the UK's obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty? And as they are part of the AUKUS Treaty, a treaty with the USA, as well as Australia, and focused in the Asia-Pacific, doesn't this risk adding to the growing tensions developing between the USA and China and make us all less safe?
Secretary of State.
No and no. The AUKUS partnership is entirely consistent with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and our obligations, and no, because it reinforces the regional stability and security, it reinforces regional deterrence, makes conflict less likely, not more likely.
Sarah Dye.
Thank
Madam Deputy Speaker, Leonardo, based just outside my constituency, has been left as the sole bidder for a major defence contract worth up to £1 billion. The project could contribute more than 12,000 jobs to the UK supply chain, including 1,500 skilled jobs, some of which would be in Glastonbury and Somerton. So could the Secretary of State confirm the timeline for decision-making on the procurement of the new medium helicopter?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can confirm that the process is underway, that we're giving it our full attention, and we'll make any decisions as soon as we can.
Luke Akehurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State will be aware that I've been raising concerns about the state of our air and missile defences. I welcome that in the SDR today that air and missile defence will be a key focus as we make the UK secure at home and strong abroad. Notwithstanding previously announced initiatives to bolster collaboration on air and missile defence with our allies, can the Secretary of State give us more detail on what conclusions the SDR drew on this vital aspect of national defence?
Secretary of State.
The SDR drew the conclusion that we need to take potential threats to our homeland more seriously than we have needed to do in the past. And that is the reason that I've made the commitment that we will invest £1 billion in this Parliament to further strengthen, especially radar, communications, the integration of our missile and air defence. But my honourable friend will appreciate this, that is part of the UK's air and missile defence is provided by our NATO allies, and we have great protection from the fact that our front line is not on the coast of the UK, but our front line with Russia is on the borders of the eastern flank.
Jim Allister.
Strapline on the front cover of the review says, "Making Britain safer." I trust the Secretary of State means making the United Kingdom safer. At page 87 it says this: "The connection between the UK Armed Forces and wider society is the long-standing and necessary foundation for the defence of the country." In light of that, will this review reverse the rundown in Armed Forces personnel in Northern Ireland, where today, according to answers in this House, there are 5 Royal Navy and Marine personnel stationed? Of all the services, all 3 together, there are only 1,305 personnel, yet we supply to those services a huge number of personnel. Will this review reverse that rundown and make sure that every part of this United Kingdom shares in the provision of the Armed Forces services?
Secretary of State.
The honourable gentleman knows well the scale and the depth of the recruitment and retention crisis. He knows very well that over the last 14 years we've seen consistent cuts in the strength of our full-time forces. This is the first government for a generation that wants to see an increase in the size of the full-time British Army, and that's what we all work to deliver.
Gordon McKee.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was pleased to join the Secretary of State this morning in Glasgow, where we met some of the workers building the Type 26 frigate. And as my honourable friend, the member for Glasgow West, has already said, the Norwegian government is considering placing an order for the frigate. So can I ask the Secretary of State to do everything he can to encourage our Norwegian friends to order the frigate?
Secretary of State.
I am, and I will.
Danny Kruger.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Defence Secretary has just thrown into doubt the future of the new medium helicopter. I'm very concerned to hear that that programme clearly may not go ahead. Can he just tell the House whether he plans to reduce the number of RAF Chinooks, which, as he knows, are very important both to our Special Forces and to our Army? Are there any plans to reduce numbers of Chinooks?
Secretary of State.
But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would encourage the honourable gentleman not to read what he has into my remarks. I was simply stating the facts as they are, that there is a process underway that has got to conclude, and that's simply what I said to his honourable friend there. Madam Deputy Speaker, this review is not about cuts. It's the first review since the end of the Cold War which has not been taken in the context of cuts, but in the context of a decade of rising defence expenditure. It's about enhancing what we have for the future. It's about building out, not hollowing out. And I hope he'll take that as the signature for the Strategic Defence Review that we've published this afternoon.
Kevin Bonavia.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was really good to see the Secretary of State come to Stevenage recently at MBDA, where they were refitting Storm Shadow missiles for Ukraine. So I very much welcome what the SDR has to say about a partnership with industry to create an engine for growth for our defence sector and our wider economy. But those tools need to have effective personnel. Last week, I was in Poland with the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme visiting our RAF personnel, and I heard them say to us, look, we cannot speak for ourselves. We need you to champion us. What can my right honourable friends say today to champion our armed forces?
Secretary of State.
I hope my honourable friend, first of all, will pass on my appreciation for the workers in his constituency at MBDA. They are exemplars of high-skilled, high-committed, highly productive workforce that contributes so much to the defence of this country. I hope he will be able to say to them that the publication of this Strategic Defence Review, a first of its kind, that challenges us to think afresh, that recognises the threats that we face, that learns the lessons from Ukraine, and makes sure that in the future we can strengthen our armed forces and keep the British people safer. I hope he'll recognise that this is a significant contribution that he urges on the government.
Cameron Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the last decade, China has expanded its military to a degree only matched since 1945 by the USSR in the Cold War era. In the last decade, the previous government did not read the signs coming from Russia. This government must read the signs coming from China. Ukraine does not have 5 years. Taiwan does not have 5 years. I invite the government again, bring it to the table and let's find 3% now.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we've increased defence spending this year by £5 billion. We will reach 2.5% in the year after next. We aim for 3% in the next Parliament. This is a record increase in defence spending. It's not been matched at any time since the end of the Cold War. The honourable gentleman could do more to recognise that basic fact.
Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Secretary of State for his statement and his leadership. In Edinburgh South West, I have Bedford Barracks, Dreghorn Barracks and also RAF Kirk Newton. So I do want to focus my comments through the lens of our service personnel. Recommendation 17 rightly links retention to accommodation, and in particular the number of moves that staff often have to make throughout their service. This can be a particular issue where children are involved and both parents are serving. So when developing his policy in this area, can the Secretary of State commit to working with groups like Forces Children Scotland to make sure the voice of children, service children, are heard in this debate? Thank you.
Secretary of State.
We will indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and my honourable friend makes a very powerful case for that organisation, but it's one among many. We're involving the voices of forces families in our defence housing strategy. We'll do the same in other areas which will help us put defence forces families and forces personnel at the very heart of our defence plans.
Ben Obsojecti.
Deputy Speaker, with reference to Recommendation 46, the US's 2025 Marine Aviation Plan published earlier this year outlined that the US Marine Corps, by far the biggest user of F-35B, has changed their programme of record, reducing orders for F-35B by 73 aircraft in favour of F-35C. The upshot of this is that the unit price of each B aircraft is about to increase by tens of millions, and we haven't yet committed to a second tranche. So what assessment has been made of the current queue for F-35A, despite the decline in its fully mission-capable rate with the US Air Force? And following on from my many written questions, what assessment has been made of converting our remaining B orders to F-35C and modifying our carriers to Katabar, which would also extend their range and therefore increase their survivability in a near-peer conflict?
Oh, very good. Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the SDR, as the honourable gentleman says, recommends commencing discussions with the US and NATO on enhancing the UK participation in NATO's nuclear mission. We have accepted this recommendation, as we have with the other 61 recommendations in this review. I will not comment in public on those discussions, but this is what putting NATO first looks like.
Alan Gemmell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I congratulate my right honourable friend on this excellent review and say, will he do all he can to use this new focus on British industry to choose Aralis as the replacement for the Hawk jet, meaning thousands of jobs in the UK, a final assembly, production and testing in my constituency in Prestwick, the opportunity for exports, the first British-built jet in 50 years, and our red arrows being British and Scottish.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I know my honourable friend will welcome the Strategic Defence Review and the reviewer's reinforcement of how valuable our British red arrows are to the nation, and he is making a very powerful case for the capacity to look for a replacement Hawk trainer in his own constituency. Madam Deputy Speaker, the SDR makes the commitment, sets the vision that allows us to say we will ensure that there is a defence dividend for the defence investments that we make in the future, that we will do more than we've seen under the previous government to direct British taxpayers' investment first to British jobs, British-based businesses, British innovation and British tech.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak as a proud member of the Armed Forces Government family. My husband Paul's a naval veteran and my daughter's a reservist. And I'm really pleased to see the whole society approach in Chapter 6 of the Defence Review. But what actions are being taken to make a career of service in the Armed Forces more attractive to young people and address the specific issues raised by those who are leaving the service, in particular how the nation fails to treat them as the heroes that they are?
Secretary of State.
The Honourable Lady makes a very powerful case, and I pay tribute to the members of her family that make their own contribution to service in that way. I would just encourage her to do more of this, to speak up, to explain, to help us close that gap that has been growing in recent years between the wide range of people in society that have no personal and family connection any longer to the forces. We need them to understand, we need them to recognise, we need them to pay tribute to the service and the sacrifice that those who do serve and put on the uniform provide for us all.
Sean Davies.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Last month I had the honour of visiting RBSL in my constituency at Telford, who along with many defence companies and organisations are so proud of the effort they help do to help Britain defend itself here and around the world. The SDR provides certainty to industry, but I think we do need to go further, ensuring every government agency and body, every government department, from skills, infrastructure, planning and availability of land, gets behind the ethos of the SDR. Will he agree with me that in order to do that, the creation of growth cluster zones, allowing certainty for local communities, will assist in that mission?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is a powerful voice and a powerful advocate for that approach. He's been a powerful advocate for Telford. He will welcome, as I know he will, that the additional UK investment under this government means that we will now have a new gun barrel factory in his constituency. It will bring the new jobs. It will bring the new prosperity. It is part of defence investment driving economic growth in the future in this country.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The world is in the midst of an arms race. Last year, according to the Stockholm Institute, $2.7 trillion was spent on arms, a 9% increase on the previous year. He's proposing a very substantial increase in defence expenditure by this country. What I find sad and disappointing is in the review, there is no analysis, there's no documentation, there's no process of how we reduce tensions around the world, bring an end to the existing conflicts, and enhance and empower the world's institutions, like the United Nations, to avoid conflict in the future, so we can deal with the real issues of insecurity, of poverty, hunger, which forces so many people to become refugees around the world. Surely there is a way that we could be doing things that brings about a more peaceful world, rather than just pouring more and more money into weapons.
Secretary of State.
I understand the right honourable gentleman's argument and his point of view. He overlooks the fact that this Strategic Defence Review draws on over 8,000 submissions that were part of the material that they base their recommendations and their vision on. And I would simply say to the honourable gentleman, we deter those conflicts that have such massive human and economic costs by being strong enough to defeat those adversaries that would do us harm. That's why NATO has been the most successful defence alliance in history over the last 35 years. That's why we will step up and play a more leading role in NATO for the future.
And the final question on this statement, Andrew Pakes.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank my right honourable friend for the statement and his leadership on this issue since we've come into government. Too many people will know that when it comes to defence, it's not just the money you spend, it's how that money is spent. And one of the challenges we saw under the previous government was that where investment went in, it did not create jobs and opportunities in the UK. Before I entered this House, I had the great privilege to serve many of our defence manufacturing workforce as Deputy General Secretary of the Prospect Trade Union. So alongside our armed service personnel, can I thank those defence workers we have in this country? Yeah. And can I ask the Secretary of State, can he tell us that it isn't just the kit we buy, it is the jobs and opportunities and apprenticeships we create that will mark the success of this really important review. Yeah.
My honourable friend hits to the very heart of this strategic defence review. A different view of the investments we make, investments that will not just strengthen our armed forces, but that will help drive growth in our economy. And I pay tribute to Prospect and GMB and Unite, the members and the workers in the defence industry that contribute so much. And Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may, can I apologise to honourable members on both sides of the House that despite nearly 2 hours at the dispatch box, we haven't got through everybody's questions, and if there are points that any member wants to raise with me, please do so directly and I will provide them with answers.
That concludes the statement. Point of order, James Cartledge.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I just want to add to what I've said earlier in my point of order and to seek your guidance, because I just reiterate how incredibly disappointing it is if you're the Shadow Secretary of State for Defence, on the day of the SDR you don't get to read it before you have to stand up and respond to the government. But the key point I want to make is this. I said earlier that we knew of one major defence company that had received a copy of the document at 8 a.m. this morning. I've been told of another major prime, one of the largest, who received a copy at 8 a.m. this morning. That means that at the time that I was messaging the Minister for the Armed Forces, begging him to let us have a copy, and he was saying we couldn't, they were having breakfast reading the SDR. And now, you heard Mr. Speaker, he referred to the phrase skin in the game. He was very concerned about a document being given early in the morning to big defence companies that have skin in the game. Can you advise us on what more we can do to probe this point and hold the government to account on the issue of commercial sensitivity?
I thank the honourable gentleman for notice of that point of order. The House will be aware of the importance Mr Speaker and indeed all occupants of this chair place on statements being made to the House first and adequate notice being given. He has put his point on record. We now move to the presentation of Bill. Ben Maguire.
Short-term let planning permission bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 4th of July.
Friday the 4th of July. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Bus services number 2 bill, Lords.
Second reading. Now. Minister to move second reading. Secretary of State Heidi Alexander.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this bill now be read a second time. I would like to start by thanking my friend, the Minister of State for Rail, for being an excellent advocate and custodian of this bill as it made its way through the other place. As someone who started his career on London's world-famous red buses, there could have been no better person in the country than the noble Lord Healey to have kick-started this government's bus reform journey. I'm proud to call him my friend and I'm grateful every day for his wise counsel, frank advice and good humour.